The Fortress, a short story. Chapter 14 and 15. Flood. The rain washed down the driveway, where rocks and lumps of clay fell away from previous storms. Darren always intended to have fresh gravel down the driveway, but either lost the will to do so or the money. The biggest task was tackling the tree roots, grown to such a degree to where they almost blocked the drive completely. So much time was spent driving to and from home that a full workday was lost just in the drive. His buddy had a big house just a few miles from the shop, on the other side of town. Darren rented a room and enjoyed some of the bachelor's lifestyle, while certain he could maintain his honor of father and husband. There were many temptations, none of which were worth the guilt of living out those temptations, but as fantasies. Secrets were only short-term lies, and long-term disasters. The driveway was a bigger headache now than the temptations he hadn't the will to entertain. He ran the car up the slippery slope with some diligence and skill and came across the roots of the old pine tree and stopped. By then the rain had become a deluge. He got out and inspected the roots. His son played there. Even as the rain washed around the roots, Darren could see evidence of where Dizzy played. I've told him time and time again not to dig around these roots. Leaving the car running, with the lights on, Darren climbed up the steep drive to his shed for the handsaw. He rummaged through the disordered piles of parts and tools, but couldn't find the saw. I bet that saw is still stuck in that damned bush. Darren looked for the axe buried in the back corner. The handle was split, and the blade rusty. He couldn't remember the last time he used it. The axe was far too big for Dizzy to have split the handle. For a short moment, he looked for a roll of duct tape to hold the axe handle together. The roll he found was dried out. On the way back to the car, he grabbed a scoop shovel set against the shed and scooped up gravel from the upper driveway. He piled the gravel against the root, and after 4 trips, he was soaked. He had enough gravel piled up to not wash under the root. He got behind the wheel and tried twice to run up over the root. The third time, he drove along the outer edge of the drive and turned sharply, rolling the left tire on the backside of the root. He took 4 more trips with a scoop shovel and piled gravel around the wheel. The root was now wedged behind the tire. Tired and angry, in a fit of contempt, Darren crawled under the old pine for the coffee can. He grabbed it, picking up toy cars as they fell out of the can. He dumped the toy cars over the gravel. Maybe I'll get traction with this. Darren tossed the can away. He climbed into the car, slamming the door. He wiped the rain from his eyes, only to smear mud over his face. He shouted, put the car in gear, and gunned it. He could hear the gravel grind under the tires, with just enough free space to rock back and forth. The car bounced forward and backward, and Darren hammered his foot between the clutch and gas pedal. He felt the front suddenly drop, the steering wheel snapping against his hand. One of the metal toy cars had gouged the sidewall of the left front tire. As he jammed the gas pedal for one last thrust over the root, his muddy boot slipped off the clutch and stalled the car. The gear lever popped out of gear. The flat tire bounced hard backward and over the root. Darren was caught off guard, wiping mud and rain out of his eyes. The shifter ground as he tried forcing it into gear, attempting to stop the car from rolling back. He pushed all his effort into the brake pedal, finding no feedback, the brakes soaked and useless. The car twisted in the muck, bounding between rain-gutted ruts. In seconds, the car rolled backwards into the mailbox and spun out into the highway. Havoc. Helen rubbed her eyes, feeling exhaustion in every motion of her body. The rush to the hospital was enough for the day, seeing the heavy storm clouds coming in through the hospital windows. It was enough. Seeing the expressions on the hospital staff, the looks of indifference. They recognized the 2 children, the frustrated mother, the avoidable catastrophe of another medical emergency. It had happened before. Cindy was snooping in Dizzy's room and got a gash on her foot from a large sliver of blue glass. Dizzy insisted on collecting broken glass and left the fragments all over his room. The gash to Cindy's foot was mere centimeters from her Achilles tendon. From then on, Cindy preferred playing somewhere else than home. Cindy was curled up in the passenger seat, asleep. The needle broke off in the finger bone. Now there were 4 little stitches. It would be enough to explain to Children's Services how this had happened. Again. Much less dealing with the neighbors, who had once before made anonymous calls to authorities about other children. Helen told herself to not let Cindy play there, but Cindy was adamant and would not let the matter go, sneaking behind Mother's back. The rain started halfway home. It was then Helen discovered the headlights didn't work. She rarely had reason to drive at night or long distances, or even in bad weather, so the matter of whether or not the headlights worked never became an issue. There were consequences, though, if these matters did become issues. The last time she voiced a complaint to Darren about the car or the house, he skipped 2 weekends being home. It was like being divorced, without the freedom to look for another man. The road was slippery. There was a logging truck up ahead. There were enough turns on the road to make passing difficult, and enough traffic to make passing dangerous. It would be nearly impossible to be seen by oncoming traffic, coming out from behind the truck in the drenching weather. The only straight stretch long enough to pass safely was uphill, towards home. There was a dead man's curve at the bottom of the hill, and a curve at the top of the hill as the highway passed the turnoff to the landfill. In less than 100 feet from the turnoff was a driveway, on the right-hand side. She could just be patient and follow the truck. There was no need to rush. There was no haste. She had no appointments. It was a long, dark, rainy day, where everyone in the car was chilled to the bone, tired and wet. She could just be patient and follow the truck. The frustration of the day made her wary of any risk, apart from getting home before Darren did. These last few months, Darren had been coming home later and later, sometimes into early Saturday. He would stumble through the door at 3 in the morning and wake everyone up, and by the time dawn came along he'd be asleep, and everyone would be wired and awake and exhausted by lunchtime. It was a wasted day. Such was the disappointment of a dramatic entrance. The dead man's curve slipped by, heavy evergreens on each side. The long straight came up. Helen edged over the center line for a clear view through the heavy mist the truck stirred up. There was only a thin opening to make the pass. The truck would slow down halfway up the hill, but the little engine in the car was hardly up to the task. Even if the truck was standing still, the car would struggle. It was a gamble if any oncoming traffic had their own lights on. Helen downshifted the little car, the engine buzzing. She held her breath for a moment, on the edge of a decision. She could just wait, couldn't she? Home wasn't that far off. Helen watched Cindy turn in her seat. Dizzy was sound asleep in the back seat. There was no rush, yet all she could think about was getting home before Darren. She eased into the oncoming lane and floored it. The car rattled and shivered as it roared by the truck. The windshield wipers were frantic, leaving little for her to see. She watched the tachometer rise to the right spot where she could shift into the next gear. The car lugged a bit, then sped up under a hint of burnt oil. At the crest of the hill, she had eased into her lane and slowed down. As she rounded the curve, she saw headlights ahead. She felt calm, timing it just right.